Hello and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on this edition is Grant Barrett, who is a candidate for the Superior Court seat, Department 1. Grant, welcome.
Thank you, Joel.
Pleasure to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Congratulations on becoming one of the top two candidates going to the general election this fall. I know that it was a busy primary season, and you definitely did well and got quite a few of the votes. So how are you feeling heading toward the general here?
I feel good. It's kind of like being ahead at halftime, but then they wipe the score. So we're just keep going and trying to get out and meet as many people as we can.
What were the percentages? I don't remember them offhand, but
I received about 44% of the vote, and I was about 15% higher than the next closest challenger.
And the way the elections work is if you do get 50% plus one in primaries, you end up taking that right then and there, and you don't have to do a general election. Did you have any hopes that you might be able to just go ahead and take it in the primary?
Well, you certainly hope. You gauge for the long run, but you certainly hope. But we just keep going.
So before we get into the race too much further, I was hoping we could just introduce you to anyone who may not have seen you before or met you, and so our viewers can know a little bit more about you as a person. And so let's go all the way back to where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Santa Clara in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that's where I grew up, is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my father was an attorney and my mother was a probation officer. So I was around legal professionals and judges my childhood. And I always wanted to go into medicine. And when I graduated from high school, a high school called St. Mary's College High School, it's in Albany. And I was the valedictorian, which was very exciting. And when I graduated, I went to UC San Diego and to study medicine and specifically genetics. Spent 2 years there. And after 2 years, I decided that this really wasn't for me. It was a lot of lab work. It was, you didn't deal much with people. We had fascinating equipment and amazing computers, but it was not something that I was willing to devote my life to. So I took some time off then. I enlisted in the U.S. Army at that point. I needed money for college, and Ronald Reagan was president, and we had a very robust military at that time. And that was a great experience for me. I spent my time there. I was in military intelligence, and that was very rewarding and enriching experience. And I continued in the reserves after that. And when I was released from active duty, I went back to college, got my degree at Cal State Hayward, which is now, I think they've called it Cal State East Bay, and in finance and real estate. And after graduating from the university, I continued on in law school, and I was encouraged by my father, who also was a lawyer. And when I graduated from law school, that's where I started looking around. I graduated with no debt. I worked all through law school. That was one of my goals, is not to have debt. And so when I graduated, I looked around for communities where I could afford to buy a home and start a family. And I have very fond childhood memories of Calaveras County up in Arnold and Lake Alpine. We would come in the winter and in the summer from the Bay Area and vacation up there. And I investigated up here, and there were a lot of opportunities up here when I started. And so when I passed the bar in '95, I had already relocated up here and chose that I would be here. Met my wife, who worked at the Mark Twain Hospital. And we settled in Valley Springs in '94, and when I got the results from the bar exam, I opened a practice here locally and have been actively involved in the legal community for Calaveras, Amador, Tuolumne, all three counties since.
You mentioned that during college you worked, and so you came out without any debt. What were some of the jobs that you did to make that happen?
Well, I I have done quite a bit. I was a waiter. I worked all the way up. My first job was as an apple peeler at a restaurant that served all kinds of great pastries and pies, and I was an apple peeler. I got paid, I remember, $4.25 a case, and I could peel and core 3 to 4 cases an hour. So I was very young, and I thought I was a very rich man at that point, making that kind of money. And so I worked all through the restaurant industry. It was always a good fallback. But I also did a lot of pool maintenance. I was a commercial carpet cleaner for several years. That's a great job for a college student because most of your work is at night after hours when everything's closed, and so you can go to school during the day and work at night. And that was a good one. I've had a variety of jobs for a while there. I even took up welding because there was such a demand when I was in law school for welders. I attended a community college and trained in welding and learned how to be a welder to make money and fund my way through school. It was important for me not to be saddled with $100,000 or $150,000 in debt when I came out, and some of my colleagues went that way, and then they were forced to work for big firms in the big city, and that was never my goal. My goal was always to be able to come out and live in a rural community and be away from the traffic and the crowds.
What were some of your favorite hobbies as a youth? What did you get into?
I was very athletic. My mother was a track and basketball coach, so immediately I had to do both of those. So I played basketball all the way through high school. By the time I graduated, I had varsity letters in football, soccer, track, and basketball. And I really enjoyed sports, long distance running. I did quite a bit of that. We had a pool as I was growing up, so I really enjoyed that. I did a lot of swimming.
Did you ever struggle between your love of academics? Obviously you excelled, being the valedictorian, and then your athletic prowess. Did you ever have to find a balance between those, or was that difficult?
I was very good in high school, and I like to think back to about my 18th birthday was the peak of my athletic career. I was very fast and had very good reflexes, but being under 6 feet tall and being under 200 pounds, there are a lot of sports that at the collegiate level you just cannot effectively compete at, is what I found. So I chose academics. I thought it would be a longer run for me. And when I chose UC San Diego, that made the decision because they have no meaningful college athletics, which I regret to a certain extent now because it's kind of fun to follow the college teams. But mine didn't have much in the way of college sports.
Okay. I think we could probably spend a whole interview talking about your time in the military. I'm fascinated about that. But let's bring it back to the preparation for your decision to
Sure.
run.
I can give you one good example of the military. I was in military intelligence, and one of the best exercises we did was I was assigned to drive around in a Jeep with huge loudspeakers on it making tank noises. And I thought that anything that would be hunting for a tank would make mincemeat of my Jeep. And I didn't know that this was the wisest strategy. But it's a chain of command issue, and you do as you're told. So that was, military intelligence was quite a bit of fun. But then on to your question was about...
Just bringing us from when you did come and settle
Sure.
here, and then you joined the legal community
Sure.
in the whole region, and then you've really spent the better part of the last 15, 20 years or so just kind of preparing yourself for really, I'd almost say today.
Right.
So just walk us through the various positions that you've held.
Sure. So I was in private practice first, so I opened my own practice. My first practice, even though I lived in Valley Springs, I opened my practice in Jackson, and that allowed me to practice both in Amador and Calaveras pretty regularly. And so I was in solo practice for about a year. There are certain economies of scale in legal practice that, because of the costs for certain hardware and legal library, that led me to form a partnership of 3 attorneys. We then could share costs with multiple secretaries and build a firm. So I built a firm in Jackson and with 2 other partners, and that also allows you to take time off. I took a lot of, our partnership was broad-based. We did everything from criminal to probate, real estate, commercial transactions, personal injury, family law, guardianships. We did pretty much whatever the community needed. One of the things that I started to do early was take a lot of court appointments. The judges would appoint me to represent indigent defendants and especially children in the middle of family law disputes, or when the government has come and removed a child from the home because of parental care issues. So I started to do a lot of representation of minor children, both in Amador and Calaveras, and as well as my regular general practice. But that got me a lot of trial experience. It got me I'm very familiar with the operations of the courts and the judges themselves. And then in 2000, Judge Moini and Judge Martin recruited me to the Calaveras Superior Court to be their research attorney and take me in-house. And so at that point, I closed down the law firm and joined the court. And they, initially as their research attorney, and so everything that's complicated that comes into the building would come to me, and I would review it, research it, work it up, and then work with the judge on the appropriate rulings given whatever facts were in the case. As time progressed, by 2001, they elevated me to the bench, and I became a temporary judge, and I started hearing cases myself. And so that was, I did a lot of civil, a lot of family, unlawful detainers, traffic, those kinds of matters. And then in 2006, Commissioner James Bosco was elected to the Tuolumne Court Superior Court bench at Tuolumne, and I was selected to replace him, and that's when I became the commissioner. And so I've been the commissioner since 2006. So for the last 8 years, in addition to the research attorney functions that I still do, and that also includes certain administrative legal work for the court, contracts, MOUs, when we enter into agreements, those things I still do. So I do court operations as well as legal research for the judges on the complicated cases, and then also work as the commissioner on the bench handling those cases.
Could you go over the basic duties of a court commissioner and what that role is for our viewers?
Sure. The position of court commissioner is created by the California Constitution. And so what happens when there are more cases than the judges assigned for a particular court, and our court has 2 judges, and every court in the state has at least 2 judges. So when there's more work than the 2 judges can do, then they are authorized under the Constitution to recruit and hire a commissioner. And so most courts have a commissioner. LA has hundreds of commissioners, and most of the smaller courts have a commissioner. And to give you a difference, I mean, Tuolumne County isn't that much bigger than we are population-wise. They may have 70 or 80,000, and we have 50,000 or so. I don't know, maybe they even have less people. But they have 4 Superior Court judges, and we have 2. So for a county that is a similar demographic, a little bit larger, there were historical differences in how courts obtained their judges. And so as a stopgap, or as a remedy for that situation for those counties that didn't get extra judges, and we're slotted, actually, we should have 3 full-time judges, and we don't, and so we have a commissioner to make up for that. So it is essentially the 3rd judicial position.
And as commissioner, do a lot of cases kind of come through you first, and then you might be able to resolve those, or if you do feel like it needs to go to an actual, let's say a trial or something like that, or continue down the process, then you would then pass that forward, or?
So what happens is you're assigned cases, and they're your cases. You have to hear them from beginning through the end as a judge. So the only difference between a commissioner and a judge in any real technical sense is that at the commencement of every hearing, I inform the parties that I am a commissioner and that they have the right to a Superior Court judge to hear their matter. And if they object to me acting as a judge in their case, they can be transferred over to another department. They may have to wait. It may be a continuance. Those calendars may be very busy. But they have that right. So, and in the 8 years I've been on the bench, there's a handful of objections, but not really. It is your case, and you're handling it, and the people have been overwhelmingly positive.
How many cases do you think you have had since becoming commissioner?
Well, in total, the cases, because I was a temporary judge before, so I was on the bench deciding cases as a temporary judge also. So I'm in excess of 25,000 cases now, trials, settlement conferences, and hearings.
Okay. So the decision to go after becoming a Superior Court judge is no small one for anyone, and I admire all the people who have put their hat in the ring and said, okay, I want to try this. And in your case and several others, you first went after it through the gubernatorial appointment from Jerry Brown, and during that process, Hugh Swift was selected, and you and Ms. File both weren't, along with a handful of other candidates. And then John Martin decided to retire, and that opened up a second seat. And then you went after that, and now Dana File also. So you two are running for that position. So
that's correct.
So when you didn't get the nod from the governor, what was your reaction to that?
Well, I found that the process, there are two evaluation processes. There's the qualification evaluation round, and that's a good and well done evaluation. I found that when we got to the governor's office, it got much more political, and I am not necessarily a political person. I enjoy this job and I enjoy this vocation because I can focus primarily on the facts and I can focus on the law as it's written, and it's inappropriate to introduce partisan bias or a certain desire for a certain kind of outcome in a case because you feel so personally. And the appointment process, once it got out of what's called the Jenny Commission, which is the judicial nomination and evaluation stage, and up to the governor's office, got much more political. And I wouldn't engage as actively as I think they wanted me to in staking positions because I find that it's inappropriate. So I don't begrudge the governor's prerogative of selecting, and I think that the process certainly fully vetted. But the judiciary is something that I think actually should be reserved for as little politics as possible, and that isn't always the case. And we're in a campaign right now, and so it's not always the case, but I don't think that it's appropriate based on our system. The judiciary needs to be neutral, and everyone has to have faith that no matter what their belief is or what their party position is, that when they come before a judge, all that's going to matter are the facts and the law. So I made that abundantly clear, and apparently that wasn't the right answer.
Okay. But then this other opportunity came up.
That's correct.
And now, you're one of two people who's going to fill that position.
Right.
So what made you want to be a judge? And I suppose you made that decision twice in a way. Okay, I'm going to go for it here, and then I'm going to run for
Sure.
it. When people ask you, how do you answer that question?
Well, I've been preparing for it since I was hired. I mean, that's what the judges have been training me to do. It's obvious that there would be retirements at some stage, and that the community needs an educated, trained, experienced judge. We're not the kind of community, even like Sacramento or San Joaquin, that can take someone out of the bar generally and put them on the bench and expect them to be able to perform. We're not a place for training on the job, so to speak, because there isn't any real place to do that. You have to be prepared to take the full breadth of the California law and be able to handle everything from property line disputes to divorces to Environmental Quality Act challenges to Subdivision Map Act challenges to evictions to domestic violence. You have to be prepared to do everything, and that's why the commissioner position and Judge Swift was a commissioner also. And that's why the commissioner position is incredibly valuable now. There used to be a municipal court, which we eliminated in 1998 through trial court unification. And that was generally the training ground for Superior Court judges. And they eliminated the municipal court in an efficiency move. But what that deprived the judicial branch of was a training ladder for individuals to move up. There used to be a justice court, and then there was a municipal court, and then there was a superior court, and each of them had different qualification levels, and you could generally move up that ladder, and they got rid of both of those positions. And now everyone is a superior court judge. You take someone straight out of the bar, and you give them the full power of the superior court. And there isn't a lot of room for error in a small court because you have to be able to handle it all. So it was something that I'd been training for, and it's something that I've found that I enjoy. It's varied work, and it's worthy of life's work, helping people, providing a neutral forum, making decisions when the parties can no longer make those decisions, and providing stability and continuity in the community.
So in a way, when you began your training, you were already kind of preparing yourself for this opportunity. Mm-hmm. Okay. If elected, if you end up becoming victorious this fall, what would be some goals that you might have when you took office?
Sure. Well, I would continue with the work that I've done. Our court is actually a fairly highly regarded court statewide. We're small enough and nimble enough that we can implement and test out projects that other larger courts with their case volumes never could. And so when I took the bench in 2000, one of the things that I identified very early was that we were doing what was called civil case management, which was active judicial oversight of civil cases. But we weren't doing that for family law cases, and family law cases are much more emotional, much more likely to have no attorneys involved at all, have third-party participants such as children who have no real say sometimes in the dispute, but their lives are in the balance. And so what I pitched the idea to our judges of instituting family law case management. And we were one of the first courts in the state to approach this, and we had a manageable enough caseload that we could do it. And because when you do something in the judiciary, you're not allowed to do test groups. Everybody has to be treated the same. It's part of equal and due process. So we were able to do it for every case. So starting in 2001, every divorce, every parentage action, every custody case came before me. And they were triaged by me, and I would be in court with them, and we would work out parenting plans, and we would work people through the system. That's a case management concept. Case management is a relatively new concept in the law. Our law comes back from the Normans. So it's 1066 is the basis of our law, so we're about 1,000 years of law. In 1995, the legislature passed the Delay Reduction Act because cases were taking too long to get to trial. And the Delay Reduction Act was the first time in our history that the legislature actually required active judicial involvement in the case from an early time frame to manage the case and take some management responsibilities. It used to be you just leave it up to the lawyers, they'd conduct their discovery, and they'd say, Judge, we're ready for trial, and we'd set trial. That's what we did for 975 years, and now we're on this new track where the judges are expected to take more active role and be more nimble in the cases. And I think it's what the public expects. The public expects that when they file a case in the court that someone's looking after it. And so we do that in civil, we do that in family, and there are many courts that do that in criminal, and I'd like to see that same process in criminal. One of the things that case management does generally is reduces the delay between filing and judgment and a decision. It tends to eliminate continuances, which, evidence gets stale. The concept of justice delayed is justice denied is a real issue. And active case management is an appropriate judicial oversight of the case. So what you do is you set expectations at each hearing about what will happen as you're progressing. So there will be exchange of information, then there will be interviewing witnesses, then there will be trial briefs and pretrial arguments, and all of those are scheduled on regular intervals, and each case is treated differently, and each case needs a little different plan, but you manage each case with expectations from both sides, and when they're not met, you spend some time discussing that and setting consequences for it so that you reduce delay in the judicial system. It also reduces the costs to the litigants and costs to society. Every time I call a case, it costs the taxpayers about $200. If that case is a meaningless continuance, oh, we're not ready, Judge, we need to go out 2 weeks, the taxpayers have just foot a bill for a hearing that included a judge and a bailiff and clerks and the facility and all of that stuff. And if nothing meaningful is happening at those hearings, that's of concern to the taxpayer, and that's of concern to the court because you're gaining a backlog. So I've implemented that in civil and in family. And the next place it really needs to go is to criminal. Criminal needs active case management. And the attorneys and the bar should welcome that, because then they know that their preparation time is not wasted because the other side's not prepared. So those are some things that I've done. I've also instituted something called tentative rulings. And tentative rulings means that the judge works up the case in advance and tells the parties based on the pleadings, this is how I would rule. And this is generally in civil and family that you'll do this. And it does a couple of beneficial things. One, it generally reduces the length of time for the hearing because the person who agrees with the tentative isn't going to spend a lot of time arguing. So it cuts down your hearing time, meaning you can get more work done in a day. Also, if both parties agree with the tentative, they can just accept it, and it's done, and the case is over, and you've really cut it down, which saves the clients quite a bit of money. And if nothing else, if there is something that someone believes is an error in the decision, they can focus precisely on that. And so there isn't this kind of throw it at the wall and see what sticks. So those are important principles, I think.
We are out of time. We just have a couple seconds left if you want to leave the viewers with anything.
Sure. I would just let the viewers know that I intend to find the facts and apply the laws written to those facts, and that's what you should expect from a judge. You should expect a judge that is hardworking. You should expect a judge that is compassionate and patient, but at the same time firm and consistent. And that's what a healthy community needs, and that's what I intend to continue. And I have a track record. And last year I was named the California Judicial Officer of the Year. So that was quite remarkable for Calaveras County to get a statewide award of that magnitude. And it's something that's a moment that I share with my clerks and with the judges, because we work together. And we have a good court to be proud of.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger. Hope you join me next time.